You're listening to the Fix the Money, Fix the World show
on the Bitcoin Made Simple Podcast Network.
Here's your host, Luke Mikic.
Welcome back to this week's edition of Bitcoin Breadcrumbs with Cory and myself. And I'm hoping that a couple of you might have a little bit of deja vu if you notice the title on the thumbnail of today's video, because 2 weeks ago in Bitcoin Breadcrumbs number 4, we talked about the inflation hitting its highest level in 30 years. And guess what? Today, we're talking about the CPI inflation hitting its highest level in 40 years. 4 decades, guys. The CPI has never seen a number of 6.8% or higher, but we're going to break all that down in today's episode because I'm telling you, my little spidey sensors for hyperinflation are going off a little bit. This is pretty eerie stuff we're seeing, but don't you worry, it's all just transitory. We're going to be talking about that, and we're also going to be talking about everything that's happened recently in the Bitcoin space. Really hope you guys enjoy this one. Before we jump on into it, let's hear from today's show sponsor, who is Coinbase. Do you guys have questions about Bitcoin? Personalize your learning and book a one-on-one video call with a Bitcoin Pro on Coinbase Connect. You can learn about mining, security, the Lightning Network, taxes, and many other topics. It's really easy. Choose your topic and pro, select a date when you're available, and bring your questions to the meeting room. Book your first call today by going to coinbase.com and clicking on the Connect tab. Be prepared for the financial revolution and get the knowledge you need.
You said thanks, Dad. That makes me feel so old.
You're my Bitcoin dad. I just expose your age.
Oh, I'm so old. I tell you, this is Bitcoin Breadcrumbs, by the way. Hell of an intro there. I've had people refer to me as Mr. Tucek before.
Mister.
In a reference of pointing something out, or you're at a business thing and somebody's being super formal. And today my son's teacher, it was the first time somebody actually said Mr. Tucek, meaning hey, you old person there. And because she was asking, just confirming, something, and she was like, "Hey, Mr. Tucek, I just wanted to confirm," and I was like, "You are talking to my father, and my dad's not here, so because Mr. Tucek is my dad, it is certainly not me." And now you call me your Bitcoin dad. Holy crap! Am I really that much older than you?
You're actually not. I've never actually told you this before, but I've always thought you've actually got a baby face. You actually don't look as old as you are. I'm not going to dox your age, but I just like taking the piss.
Oh no, I definitely, yeah, I definitely have a baby face, and it's funny. Hopefully, this will be good for our kids because my wife has looked the same since she was about, facially, about 5 years old, and she just still looks young. So
you lucky duck.
We yeah. Oh, dude, there's a saying here, and there's a saying with in reference to American football and women is that I outkicked my coverage. She's so far out of my league. So it's
that's got a nice ring to it. As an Australian bogan, I've never heard that. I outkick my coverage. We call it punching above your weight.
Yeah. Oh, dude, I was definitely punching above my weight. I'm just to the point where people are like, "Oh, wow, okay." They're starting to wonder what was wrong. My father-in-law always tells me that that they get money from the state, and that's why she settled for a guy like me. Financial incentives. But anyways, enough about me. Let's talk about you.
Let's talk about the news. And speaking of financial incentives, big news tonight. Today, actually, ladies and gentlemen. Last week, we were telling you that inflation hit its highest level in 30 years at 6.2%. Well, today we get to tell you that it's hit its highest level in 39 years because the CPI or the CPI has come out and it's hit 6.8%. So, what are your thoughts on that, Cory?
They're really doing their best to hold it back. And I'm starting to wonder, like, I'm not taking their side on manipulating. And you, by the way, you're showing your messages
I know.
on the recording. Okay, you're
I'm
totally
pull-
doxing your.
I know. I know.
No, you're good. You're good. You didn't dox anything.
Just
And
it's okay.
but yeah, but no. So I think, like, like the CP lie. You know, I do wonder because it's mainly nefarious, but I've been thinking about it a lot lately. I've been doing a lot of deep thinking about Bitcoin. That's why I haven't been in a lot of spaces. I've been overwhelmed by everything else in life, but but yeah, I've been, it's not all nefarious, because there is probably somebody in there that's like, well, like, if we show the real number, this thing is going to explode and fall apart.
Mm.
Um, what I mean? So I don't know. You give me your thoughts on that. Like, do you think that is there any shred of that in this CP lie that comes out?
Well, you could definitely look at it two different ways. You could look at it from the really conspiratorial angle with tinfoil hat. But this is
Do you
kind
have
of
yours,
where
by the
I
way?
land. Hey,
Do you have
like
your tinfoil hat?
I do. I always do. There it is, ladies and gentlemen. Tinfoil hat's on. So let me go through my tinfoil hat thought experiment. I think the central bankers are evil. I think if you read the book, The Creature from Jekyll Island, it shows pretty clearly who owns the central banks, and they're not nice people. Let's put it that way. And essentially, they can hide inflation and keep it lower for longer. That gives them a license to print more money. And put very simply, whether it's fiscal policy or monetary policy, it doesn't matter how you print the money, it's bad for the little guy. Okay, it's as simple as that. So if they can keep inflation low, they get a license to print more, and that means they can extract more value and more money from the lower and the middle class and send it to the cantillionaires. That's my thoughts on it, but I like your angle as well, because if they were to report inflation how it really is, it's 15%. If you look at the shadow stats inflation metric or the Chapwood inflation metric, for any new
And that's
listeners,
how they used to measure it, right?
yeah, yeah, I can even pull that up while we're talking on screen. But these two different websites simply measure inflation, how the governments themselves used to measure inflation. And when you have a look at it, it's not 6% like the government claims it is. Real inflation is much closer to 15%. So I think we've been through this a couple of times, or maybe once before on the
Mm-hmm.
podcast. But so the blue line is how governments used to measure the metric, and you can see that's hitting 15%. My goodness. And you can see how the governments measure it today in the red. That's only hitting 6-7%.
Yikes.
Yeah, so I do like your angle though, like how you said, if the government's reported inflation how it really is, obviously that would trigger hyperinflation. Hyperinflation occurs because it's a loss in faith of the currency. And if people were aware that inflation is 15%, they're probably more likely to spend the money even faster than they are. And then that gets into that self-perpetuating feedback loop that triggers a hyperinflationary event.
Yeah. I mean, I just don't understand how people aren't, flipping out now. Like, it's so funny to me, and like, people aren't freaking out because I'm sitting there freaking out. Um, and you kind of feel like Noah building the ark, where you're just building the ark and everybody's like, look at that crazy guy there. Like, that guy's insane. But when the floods come, it's gonna be great to be on that boat. But it was kind of funny too. It's just, you know, do you have this struggle when you go venture out in the normie land? Um, like, I was talking to the mortgage broker, and we're talking about something about refinancing, like, we're getting this new house. It's like, you could refi in a little bit, blah, 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 blah. They're like, but you don't know how long rates are going to stay this low, and like, they really do think that, like, at any moment interest rates are going to start to go up because, they're like, how could they be so low? They're never going to go lower. And I'm like, I don't think you understand how this money works. Like, they have to be low. They have to stay low. They can't go the other way at this point. And this is my smooth brain mindset. But like, they can't, from what I understand, start raising rates on mortgages, because if they do, that will just have a cascading effect, won't it?
Yeah, they can't raise rates if we're operating under the assumption that everything's above board and everything's fair. If you raise rates to even 4%, even you raise rates to 3 to 4%, you've got a $400 trillion debt bomb around the world. Governments would go insolvent. The mortgage, like you said, the financial system would go insolvent. That would cause the mortgage-backed security market to go insolvent. Debt would collapse, and you'd probably see a 95% correction in equities and house prices and everything. But so I say that, and you would think that they wouldn't raise interest rates. I don't put it past them. I don't put it past them. If I would again chuck on my tinfoil hat, maybe it's some sort of, maybe it's a game plan. You spike interest rates at 3 or 4% temporarily. You kick the everyday person out of their home because they can't afford their mortgage, like they did in the 2008 global financial crisis. And they do the exact same thing they did in 2008. The little guy gets kicked out. He doesn't get a bailout. And then they print all the money and they give it to the insolvent banking system. So yeah, this has kind of been why I've been on my crusade against housing recently, because it sounds like a sure bet economically, because they can't raise rates, but people in my mind need to take into consideration all of the other strings that are attached to housing. And being in debt to a tyrannical government as it's going insolvent during a global debt bomb and a global hyperinflationary event. That was a lot, but
It doesn't sound like it doesn't sound too good.
Unprecedented.
I
We've never
mean,
seen it before.
yeah. So what happens there? Because I mean, so I'll take it from my perspective. Like, personally, what I'm doing is, people talk about like the housing market crashing and everything, and I'm like, okay, I can afford this house at this fixed rate for the term. Like, that's not going to affect. That's not going to change that. I can afford that. The house might go down, but but it doesn't. I don't care, because I'm not storing my wealth in that, if that makes sense. Like, I'm not, if the value of the house goes down 95% and I'm still paying that mortgage, that I can afford, I don't care, me personally, because I'm not looking to get value out of that house. I'm looking as a place to live. The value for me in the house is the property, the freedom, the sovereignty that I can get. So I don't know, is that like an okay way to look at it, do you think?
Yeah. I mean, I think the property that you've got with land and in a good position that kind of gives you some freedoms is the best kind of property investment that you could be making. Yeah, I mean, when I think about property and I throw it out there to people, I say, look, property is going to lose 90% of its value in today's dollars when you transition to a Bitcoin standard, just because that's just simply how the maths works. If you've got no debt on a Bitcoin system, property is going to be repriced 90% lower. And then I think,
and why is that?
That's because we've got a $400 trillion debt bomb. And on a Bitcoin standard, you're not going to have that kind of debt. You're not going to have a 400% global debt to GDP ratio. So that just means, like, if you have a look at home prices on a gold standard, typically the average home would be priced at a 2.5 to 3x multiplier of your annual salary. So, for example, if your average man earns $50,000, that means your average home price was $150,000 or a 3x of your income on a gold standard. So, and today around the world, most property prices are around at least a 5x of your income. It's actually much closer to a 10x in most cities. And even here in Australia, some of the property prices are priced at a 15 times your annual income. Versus, yeah. So on a Bitcoin standard, I think property prices are going to correct to what they were on a gold standard. So that's like a 70, 80, 90% repricing in property.
That's crazy. Yeah, because I mean, so in Bitcoin, what will the multiple be on a Bitcoin standard? What would the multiple be of like the house's value versus your annual income?
I think it'll return
like
to
gold?
a 2x. It'll return, a property will return to 2x your annual income, and today it's at 15x. So if a property price in Sydney, for example, is $1.5 million, and let's just say an income's $100,000 in the inner city, that means on a Bitcoin standard, I expect that property that's worth 1.5 million to be worth 200,000 on a Bitcoin standard. So if there's any math nerds out there who's listening in, that's a pretty big discount. What's that, 80, 90% correction in property prices. But there's so many more risks to property that people don't understand. I think I wouldn't be surprised, again, tinfoil hats going on, but I wouldn't be surprised to see your vax status and your medical status attached to your ownership rights. You already seen that in one of the states in America. A document came out that was leaked, and it showed that to have a driver's license in the future, it's going to be attached to your quote unquote social credit score and vaccination status. So if that's coming for your driver's license, I wouldn't be surprised if that's coming for
what state was that?
I can't remember. I saw it on Twitter. I could maybe put it in
be
the
like
show.
a super blue state.
Yeah, it would have been a blue state for sure. But yeah, I mean, in Nigeria, you can't get your money out of the bank unless you show them your vaccination card. So I just think that trend's going to continue. And then as governments get more, so that's one of the risks that I see with property. Another risk is property ownership rights. Another risk is unrealized capital gains tax. Because the governments are going insolvent. People need to understand that. This is the first time we've seen governments go insolvent in 80 years. The last time was in the 1940s at the conclusion of that long-term debt cycle. So I think people were just underestimating to what lengths and how tyrannical governments will get. And to pay down their debt, they essentially just tax everyone's wealth away. They inflate it away, they tax it away. And I think property is just it's a really easy target because you can't move it, you can't hide it. They know where you are. It's attached to your name, and they've got you in debt as well. So just my thoughts on property. I'm a property bear.
So you're saying I shouldn't be buying this house? You say this like literally as I'm like
everybody
like
has
moving
different
boxes all through my
circumstances.
house.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I know.
The so well, I want to get to the I think the other topic we're going to talk about is the price, and ever since we did our last breadcrumbs, but I want to talk on what you were talking about there a little bit. So walk people through, because you have a better, at least you can verbally discuss a better the history of the governments going insolvent 80 years ago. So it's basically after World War II, they were all broke.
Yep.
Was that right?
Yeah, so I can pull up a tweet thread I've done on it. But essentially you get to a situation where debt is unsustainable. And when you've built up debt to levels that is unsustainable, governments either need to default on that debt. And the way they default on debt is they never just, wipe their hands and say, okay, we got over leveraged, we're going to let everything collapse 95%, because they tried that in the 1930s. Like you saw a 95% correction in the stock market. So naturally, they prefer not to do that, and they prefer to just print into oblivion. And obviously, in the 1930s, at the conclusion of the previous long-term debt cycle, the government debt to GDP ratio was like 120%. And they essentially just inflated that away to below 60% in only 15 years. And the way they did that was to pin interest rates low for a period of 10 years through the 40s. And what they did is they spend a lot of money. So for anyone watching on the YouTube, you can see a little chart I've pulled up. I'm just showing that you can see the government was running massive fiscal deficits. That's highlighted by the big grey bars. And you can also see by the orange line, that's interest rates. So you can see the little note there called yield curve control. They essentially pinned interest rates low for a period of 10 to 15 years. So when interest rates are at 0% and real inflation's at 15% for 10 years, what you get is you get the ability to inflate away your debt. So here's the next chart. We're looking at the same time period. You can see the US government had debt to GDP of 120%. And you can see by the 60s, they'd got that down under 60. So put very simply, this is how they do it. They print money, they devalue the money, and they pay back their debt in the devalued dollars. That's very simply how governments deal with debt to GDP ratios that high. And today, we have got to the conclusion of a long-term debt cycle. I'll pull up another chart. So this is from a tweet thread I did a while ago. People can go and check it out.
But it's really funny too, because I just tweeted, I retweeted President Biden's tweet. The 4 hours ago, his Twitter account put out, it said the United States pays its debts when they are due. That's why today I signed a bill to fast track the process to raise our debt limit. And I honestly, it took me 5 takes to realize that it wasn't satire. I was like, is this a joke? Is this I couldn't believe it. I was like, wow, somebody did a deep fake. Somebody was able to make their account look like the president's account. That's insane. That's an insane statement.
Yeah. It's literally backwards. We're living in a clown world. You're living in a backwards world where truth doesn't matter. And he's literally just gaslighting the public. And I think it's also worth noting the reason they can't raise interest rates is because of the debt. I didn't say that before when I was ranting and raving. And that's why they have to resort to printing money. Just because it's the easiest way out of a debt bomb. Speaking of gaslighting, something else I saved, or something else I wanted to show today was the what do they call themselves? Is it the BLS, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, came out this morning, perfect timing with the high inflation print, and they're going to change the way CPI is measured starting January 2022. What a surprise.
Didn't they just change it recently?
Yeah. And they're changing
it. They're gonna change it again?
Yeah. Weights for the CPI will be calculated based on consumer expenditure data from 2019, 2020. So there you go. Just more manipulation. I haven't even dived into this one. I don't know exactly what it means, but I don't think they're going to be, I don't think this is a sign of truth.
No.
Here's another topic that I've got on the books for today.
Bring it.
So there's this lady, right? And her name's Saul Amarova, and she's President Biden's next nominee for the comptroller of the currency. And she's a full-blown communist. This chick is a full-blown communist, right? Saul Amarova. She even grew up in the USSR, in the Soviet Union. Obviously, she calls herself an economist, but you can see even the Washington Post is taking her apart. Joe Biden isn't a socialist, but his nominee to regulate banks has some pretty radical ideas. So she was handpicked from Joe Biden, and we're just going to go through a couple of the ideas that she proposed in a recent 70-page paper. So anyone who doesn't know her kind of gets an idea of who she is. Essentially, one of the first things she really likes, she wants to cut out the entire banking system, and she wants everybody to have an account with the Fed. So that's okay.
God. Yeah.
No, yeah, and here's another point she raised. In extreme and rare circumstances, when the Fed is unable to control inflation by raising interest rates, the Fed could confiscate deposits from the Fed accounts in order to tighten monetary policy. So she's advocating for everybody to have an account with the Fed
from you
and literally steal money out of your account to tame the inflation. So obviously she's got some even more radical ideas, but obviously, so she was stirring up a lot of people were calling her out, rightly so. She's a full-blown communist. She's got some really scary ideas. And she had to recently withdraw from the race to be the next OCC, the comptroller of the currency. So that was really interesting.
So it was Biden's nominee, and then she had to withdraw because of the backlash.
I haven't found the exact reason why she had to withdraw, but it's strange that she has, because she was very qualified, quote unquote, for the position. Like, she's a big Keynesian. But I want to read a tweet from Elizabeth Warren, because she's commenting on the situation. She goes, it's no secret that big banks oppose strong rules and regulators that protect the economic security of families. After living the American dream, Saul Amarova deserves better than outrageous red baiting. She's a leading expert on financial regulation and staunch consumer advocate. So
Jesus.
Warren is going into bat for the communist. That explains why she hates Bitcoin so much. The way she describes Saul Amarova and her plans to confiscate your money out of the bank account, she says Saul deserves better treatment. She's looking out for the protection and security of families. It's absolute gaslighting.
I mean, it's like they're doing it on purpose. You know, like it just feels like they're doing it on purpose. They're trying to fuel this division, because there's no way this is by accident. These absolute blatant statements that just gaslight everything.
Yeah, I ask myself the same thing every day, mate. I say, in this clown world, no way is what they're saying is true. I think I wouldn't be surprised if they know it's not true, and they're just trying to confuse and disorient people as much as possible, because that's the goal. You don't want people understanding what's going on. That's an economic reset. You want the people confused and distracted and infuriated by all these different mandates that are coming left and right, and this news article and that article. You want them really confused and in a state of disorientation, so they don't understand that their wealth's getting extracted at a rate of 15 to 20% a year.
And that's what's happening to everybody. They have, I mean, it's just the magician's trick, you know. When a magician is pulling a trick, you know, they have a lot of distractions to guide you away from what they're really doing. Um,
Bingo.
hmm.
Absolutely nailed it. It's a controlled demolition of the largest, you know, God, I'm going to look stupid in 10 years if we're sitting here and, you know, the feds kick the can for another 10 years and it all looks good. But I really do, plebs. Like, I'm telling you, my balls are on the line. This smells like a hyperinflationary event and an economic reset to me. So I'm pretty
Well, I
outspoken
mean,
against it. Could be wrong. Could
that's
be wrong, but
yeah, we could be wrong, but I mean that's why, like, that's why we're moving. You know, I mean, we would have, you know, our first house was our first house. It was always going to be just our first house. You know, not big enough for a growing family. Um, and but the elements of this new place, let's just say, I never thought I'd be living somewhere like this. I was like a city kid, like, you know, went to school in the city. That's what I'm comfortable there. Um, and yeah, here I am doing the opposite, looking at making Bitcoin miners heat greenhouses so that I can have food source. And because I think, you know, you've heard me advocate it many times, but you just gotta, people gotta hunker down, you know, go about life as, you know, keep going, live life as normal, but have your oh shit moment prepared, you know. Have your, I always say, you know, my wife is just like, like I go on these rants and talk about these different things, um and she's like, and but like she'll be glad that whenever, like, you know, like shit hits a fan, that I'll be sitting there with, like, you know, the car running and like my map, and like I know where we're going. Like I have it all laid out. Don't worry, we got it, we're under control. um
I think it's a great idea. I think everyone should be prepared. I mean, the
well, yeah,
UK, the U, the UK called the military in to ration fuel when there were fuel shortages. In hyperinflationary events, you're going to see fuel shortages. You're going to see food shortages. This was an interesting article that I was perusing today. This chick, it was published in the Washington Post, and have a look at this. This is a quote from this chick. She's a highly esteemed economist. She's talking about the food storage, the food shortage and the empty shelves in the shopping center. She says, since 1911, we've been obsessed with getting stuff and getting it fast. That's dumb. Deprivation is not only the new normal, it's the way things should be. Deprivation. Boy.
depriving
Corey.
people. Oh my god,
What do
like,
you reckon?
I mean, like, I listened to Mark Moss with um Peter McCormick today, you know, and like he said, and I've been telling people this same thing. Um, so he stole it from me. No, I'm kidding. Is that, you know, take their word for it. You know what I mean? Like I've been telling, I like was telling my dad, like whenever he's like, "What do you think?" I said, "Dad, I wouldn't. I would think I'm a conspiracy theorist if it wasn't on websites where they said these things. Like they're saying what I'm telling you." So we've been living in a world where we want things faster, and depriving ourselves of it is actually a good thing. Like that's like advocating for like going on like a religious hunger strike is like, you know, we're doing you a favor, you know, because now you get the opportunity to go on this religious hunger strike. Um and you can't go on a, like, you just, that's not gonna have people with rational minds making rational decisions.
Absolutely wild. It's absolutely wild. And like you said, they're telling us these things, and that's why. And like before, I said, hey, I could be wrong about this hyperinflation and currency reset. But that's why I kind of don't think I might be, because they're telling you the World Economic Forum is telling you we need a great reset, and COVID has provided us the perfect opportunity to implement a reset. You've also got the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, telling you that we need a Bretton Woods 2.0. We haven't seen an economic reorganization or a reset like that since 1944 with the Bretton Woods Agreement. That was 80 years ago. Surprise, surprise, at the end of the last long-term debt cycle. When that was what we were talking about 10 minutes ago with the deleveraging. When things get delivered, you get resets and reorganizations. And I think that's what we're going to see.
Yikes.
Because they're telling us, like they are telling us, you will own nothing and you'll be happy.
The thing is, though, is that they're going to lose. I don't think Bitcoin has won in the sense that the game's over. Obviously. But I do think Bitcoin has won. I think the die is cast. And they're, to use an American football reference, they're just running out the clock. Bitcoin's running out the clock right now. Game's over. Kind of like it'll basically be like in chess, whenever you have to resign, the game is over. You can keep going back and forth, and moving your queen, but the game's over. You lost. And at some point you have to tip it over and extend your hand across and say, I resign. And so the good news is Bitcoin already has them in that position where that's no matter what they do, that is where it leads to.
Any listeners, Cory and I, we are pretty strapped on time. This isn't a very professional weekly wrap. We don't organize our podcast or plan anything, but this is an absolute perfect segue into the last topic I wanted to bounce off you. I agree. Bitcoin's 100% one, but you touched on something there. They're probably going to fight it. And I agree. I think they're going to really fight Bitcoin. Like this is the separation of money and state. We haven't seen this in 5,000 years. And the ability to steal people's time and money through a magic money printer, and you call it inflation, that's a really powerful thing. So I think they are really going to fight. And in that fight, trusted third parties are security holes. You don't want any trusted third parties. And this gets into the last topic. The AWS server went out this week. We all know that a lot of these shitcoin projects rely on the AWS servers because they're very, very centralized. And surprise, surprise, a quote unquote decentralized exchange, DYDX, had to temporarily shut down when AWS went out. So this applies for the Bitcoin and Bitcoin over the next 5 years. Trusted third parties are a security hole, whether it's AWS or whether it's coins on exchanges. Get your Bitcoin off an exchange.
Get it in cold storage. Yeah, I mean, this goes to, I've talked about it a lot before, but and people, if you listen to the episode I did with Ben Ark, the Movies Plus, my streaming platform, we're specifically trying, like, we are focused and have been focused from the beginning of not relying on server farms, third parties, all that kind of stuff. And that's why we, are looking and discovered that there's a way to use Lightning and Bitcoin as a way to create a decentralized server farm that can, there will never be this problem, because a lot of the streaming platforms run off of AWS, and so if they go down, you're in some shit. Yeah, it's just, there's too much centralization in everything is becoming, I mean, this is what Mark Moss talked about with Peter McCormick. We're like talking about how everything is moving towards centralization, and there's enough of a reaction. You can't push the two ends of a magnet together that don't want to go together. There will be a repel. It'll repel off and go in the opposite direction. um but yeah, it's funny because Ethereum, I mean, how much of their network is held up by AWS?
Well, an article I read last year showed 80% of the nodes were reliant on AWS. But a lot of people quote a figure of 40% of the nodes. So, plebs,
Now,
don't trust me. Go and
how
verify it.
many Bitcoin nodes are reliant on AWS?
Not many, because it's easy to run a node for the Bitcoin network. Very easy. You can run one on a laptop. With Ethereum, you can't. You've got to spend thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars to be able to run in your own node and have a vote in the network. So guess what? You're not decentralized.
um and what caused the outage? Did they say? I didn't get to read too much into it.
No, I
But I
didn't.
mean, it's so easy to have an outage. You know what I mean? um like, I told my wife, like, early on, I said, all right, if like the internet ever goes down and cell phones don't work, here's where we meet. Like, this is the meet. This is the meet spot. um uh Man, that actually be a great movie. Let's make that movie.
Let's do it. You heard it here first, plebs. We're making it.
um yeah, it's just it's you can't rely on. So I mean, yeah, the basic advice is, if you're relying on any one third party, um think think about that. Even think about that with cars, like with like chips. I've been thinking about that, of like buying some older cars. I mean, this will like serve two purposes, like a guilty pleasure, but also security purposes. To buy like a 1960s Camaro, or like a Shelby Mustang, if you know what that is. Um, and these are the machines that are mechanical. Don't rely on computers.
Yeah.
You
I'm never
know,
getting one. I'm never getting in one of those self-driving cars. No way.
no, with your tinfoil hat, your self-driving car is gonna go right off a cliff. And
Exactly. Exactly.
the
I'm on that many different
uh
lists.
yeah, I'm sure you are. We'll see what happens when you try to get in the States the next time.
Yeah.
um yeah, just think about the movie. Did you ever see the movie War of the Worlds with Tom Cruise?
Yeah, I think so. A long time
So
ago, I
he,
think.
like, basically, like, the alien technology could like wipe out any electronics, and he happened to like be able to hop in the one car that was like purely mechanical, and they were the only ones who were able to drive and get away. And I remember at that time thinking, like, okay, if shit ever hits the fan, I need to have a vehicle that can, is purely mechanical. um yeah, so anyways, but yeah,
No,
I
that's
don't know, I guess, before I ramble about movies and bore everybody to death.
let's let him go. I think that's everything we've got on the docket. I think that's a great point. Mechanical, electrical things are really interesting to think about. If you're a prepper, and if like I don't think it's likely at all. But if the internet and the power were to go out, like Klaus Schwab is telling you it is, okay, that's one of his other predictions for 2021, sorry. He held a cyber polygon, a global simulation. What would happen if the internet and the power grid went down? He is telling you it's happening. Okay. He's the same man who told you a global coronavirus pandemic would spread amongst the world in September of 2019. Okay. So Klaus is telling you the power is going to go off. But I just think the things like mechanical cars, they're really good things to think about. I myself, what I'm thinking about is, if I've got a motorhome, do I want to have it parked inside my driveway, where I have an electronic gate? Because if the power goes down, is that 100% battery powered, or is that mechanical gate reliant on electricity? So yeah, I could have a motorhome, and I've got my fucking guns. I'm good to go. But if the power goes down, I can't get out the goddamn gate. I just think that's a great point you raised about the cars. If you
That's
are a
when you just
hardcore
you
prepper,
gun it and ram it.
what's that?
That's when you just gun it and ram the gate.
Yeah, get me out of here. Yeah, lots to think about, plebs. But that's probably that's good.
Yeah,
It's a
and
good note to end on.
apologies to the plebs for the if we seemed a little all over the place, but had a crazy week, and we're both kind of swamped with some stuff right now. So all good
Yeah.
things though, and there's
Yeah.
gonna be more coming. So we'll make sure to get back and do this next week, and not let 2 weeks go, because I'm sure you guys were all dying to not hear me and Luke talk about Bitcoin.
Yeah, we were pretty pessimistic today. Actually, I'll leave us on a good note. Plebs, the separation of money estate's going to be a beautiful thing to watch. I think there could be a fight coming, but obviously, I'm just preparing for the worst. You can always hope for the best. Who knows? Central banks might we might get this peaceful transition onto a Bitcoin standard where the two systems are allowed to work in parallel for as long as possible, and not much harm is caused, and everything's, kumbaya, and, hope for the best. But it doesn't matter. Bitcoin's inevitable. And once we get there, it's going to be a pretty fucking nice world to live in. So let's leave it on an optimistic note, because I
agree.
Yeah.
I look forward to it. It's going to be great, plebs.
Me too. All right. It's
All right,
been
we'll catch
fun,
you guys
Cory.
next week.
See you guys.